Hello, everyone. Welcome to the GEMS podcast. I am so glad you all are here.
Today, we are so lucky to be joined by Dr. Tammy Goulet, who is a coral reef biologist and a professor at Ole Miss. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
To start off, will you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
So as you said, I'm a faculty member at the University of Mississippi. I'm in the Department of Biology, and I am a professor. And I have a research lab. I have currently 3 female graduate students. They're all doing PhDs. And I have research that I do both in the Caribbean, off the shores of Mexico, 20 minutes away from Cancun. And I currently have a student that is also doing research in Israel. So she's currently in Israel and she's doing research in the Red Sea on corals there. So I have research all over the globe. And I'm also a mother, and I have 5 children. 3 of them are in college right now, and 2 are in high school.
And did your children decide to do something similar to you? Did they find your work really interesting, or?
So that's a really good question. So as they were growing up, we really didn't have family vacations per se, or what you would imagine as a family vacation, because they always went with me to my research sites. So they did get to travel all over the place. They've been to Puerto Rico, they've been to Israel, they've been to Mexico, they've been to Hawaii. They have traveled extensively, but it's always related to my work. And so actually, my 3 older kids that are right now in college, they're doing very different things from me. One is a dual major, so actually 2 majors. She's getting 2 majors with the School of Journalism. She's getting an integrative marketing communication degree, and with the College of Liberal Arts, she's getting an art degree with emphasis on graphic design. So she's doing that. My son is in mechanical engineering, and my daughter is in the Croft Institute for International Studies. So they have not followed biology, but what I do know is that they have acquired the drive to be successful, because when you're self-driven and self-motivated, that's when you achieve things. And so no matter what discipline you're doing that in. And so they have seen me as a role model for that, and they are excelling in their studies, although they're different.
And doing multiple majors, that is really tough. So I bet that they are incredibly smart. That is a difficult task. So what experience or person drew you into your field?
So I have always been drawn to biology. My dad is a medical doctor, but he has what's known as MD, PhD. So MD is a medical doctor, a PhD is a doctor in philosophy. So in addition to treating patients, he does research. And so growing up, I saw that in the house as an example. And I was fascinated by research. I decided very early on that I did not want to be a medical doctor. And so I went into biology. And then as an undergraduate, I took a course, and then I got a summer support to do a fellowship in a marine lab. And ever since then, I've been working on coral reefs and asking research questions about coral reefs.
And if your dad was an MD and a PhD, that's what you said, right?
Yes.
So did he have to do that schooling separately? I just don't know how that process works.
So that is an excellent question. Nowadays, if somebody is interested in doing both, there are some programs in the US, for example, where you can get both degrees at the same time. So it takes you longer than a regular medical degree, but it doesn't take you that much longer. So you add a year or maybe two to the schooling, but then you have an MD, PhD. In his case, he was a medical doctor, and then he took a sabbatical, which is a leave where you get paid by your home institution to further your education. And he took a sabbatical, and he did a PhD. So he did the research, and he did that in the University of California.
Wow. And so more about you, like as a marine biologist, and also paired with being a professor at Ole Miss, how does your day look like? I bet your days look different when you do either job. So how does that work, and how do you balance it?
So again, I mean, you're asking amazing questions. My work usually in an academic year, right? Not in regards to COVID, but usually in an academic year, I am in Oxford, Mississippi, and I'm at the university, which is actually in University, Mississippi, during the year. And then in the summer, I go to the field and do field work. So my days in the summer are completely different than my days during the semesters. The interesting thing about academics and academia and being in biology is that there is no schedule. So you basically decide what you're going to do every day. And so I have certain things I need to do. I have certain responsibilities, like I teach a course. So of course I can't not be there when I'm supposed to be teaching my course. So I have to be there when I teach my course. And then there are committee meetings and faculty meetings. But for the most part, I do what I set out to do in a given day. And so there is not a lot of structure from, it's not like you are at a desk and you have a set lunch period and then you come back and you clock in and you clock out. I decide what I'm going to do every day. And so some days I do lab work. And so when we come back from our field site, we have samples and we process them. So we do, for example, we isolate the DNA, we extract the DNA, and then we do various molecular techniques to identify the animals that we're working with and their symbionts. Other days I write. So I write research papers, I write research proposals. And so things are very fluid. No one day is similar to the next.
And with your research lab, how you were saying that you work with students who are internationally working on projects. So what is the process in selecting students that you're going to work with? Because I know that a lot of girls in my group are probably interested in researching when they go to a higher education. And so I was just wondering what that process is like.
So when you are an undergraduate, so when you start your undergraduate degree, and it doesn't matter, I mean, you don't have to be in biology to be interested in doing work in the sciences, right? And so when you are in an undergraduate degree, many universities offer independent research projects. And so those are ones where you can sign up and actually get college credit for doing research in a lab. And so the idea is that you're exposed to laboratory techniques and you're exposed to research and you're exposed to asking research questions while you are an undergraduate. Sometimes if you are part of, let's say, an honors college, you actually need to do a senior thesis. So many of the people that are in the honors college in our university that are biologists work in research labs. And so I have had undergraduates that have actually even gone with me to Mexico and then continued their research throughout the academic year as part of their honors thesis. When you finish your undergraduate degree, and this is something that people may not be aware of, so for your undergraduate degree, you need to pay for your education. And you can do that through scholarships and fellowships, through loans. Hopefully you won't go too much into debt to do that. When you get to the master's or the PhD level, so you apply to graduate school, many graduate schools offer teaching assistantships or research assistantships that cover everything. So not only do they cover your tuition, they give you a stipend that you can live off of, and many of them also have fringe benefits. So I would highly recommend that if you are interested in graduate school, that you look for places that offer you that. And the way to find out where you want to go, sometimes people have an institution in mind. So they say, oh, I want to go to Harvard because it's Harvard. But the important thing to consider is who you're going to be working with. And the way you can find out about people is to read research articles. And if you find research articles that you think are fascinating or you're very interested in the topic, then you literally can write an email to that person and say, hi, I'm considering going to graduate school. Are you accepting students? And if they are, then you can have a dialogue. So the 3 graduate students that are currently in my lab, that's what they did. And they're from all over the US. And they contacted me, they sent me an email. We followed it up with phone conversations, and they applied and they got into the university, and they're in my lab right now doing their own research.
That's really neat. And I know that there's so many people at my school that are like interested in doing that. So that information is really helpful, especially for me because I'm a senior going to do undergraduate schooling education. So I know this is kind of a funny question, but as like a biologist looking at coral reefs, do you have like a favorite one? Like, obviously they're all different. So when you go, is there one that you're just more excited to see?
Yes. So when my favorite reef or my favorite region is actually in the Red Sea. And we go diving. So my graduate students right now is doing research in the Gulf of Eilat, which is at the tip of the Red Sea. The reason that I like those reefs so much is that the water clarity is amazing. So you can see down to amazing depths. And the interesting thing is that the Red Sea is surrounded by desert. And so you have stark, basically naked mountains that are red and various shades of red. And then you stick your head in the water and it's a amazing rainforest with so many colors and so many fish and so many different corals, and it's just teeming with life. And so it's such a stark contrast, and it's beautiful.
And I was reading just some things on your website about kind of how climate change has impacted your work and the expectation 30 years ago when you started to now. So what progressions have you seen and how has it affected your work?
So it's kind of, it is very, very sad to see the coral reefs deteriorate over my lifespan, right? And I'm not ancient. And so when I started diving, which was when I was, I'm trying to think, I think 21, there were no women, or there were very, very few women divers. There was definitely nothing pink in wetsuit attire. And the reefs were amazing. And you can see first of all, we have had multiple cases where the seawater temperature has gone up for periods of time. And so the corals, you may have heard of coral bleaching, where the corals lose their symbiotic algae. So they look white because the animal itself is see-through. So you see the skeleton underneath. And then eventually, if they die, then there's no living tissue anymore. And so those events have occurred over time. And I can see when I go into the water that the reefs are changing, and they're not changing for the better. And so the diversity has gone down, and there are many areas that are dead. And so it's discouraging to see that. But one of the things that is important in what I do is to try to understand coral reefs better, because if we understand things, then we can deal with them. So let me give you an analogy that is not from a coral reef. Before people knew what diabetes was, they didn't know how to deal with it, how to treat it, and people died relatively early. And now that we know what it is, then if a person doesn't, there are different types of diabetes, but if a person doesn't have insulin, then you give them insulin. And that came about from doing the research, right? And so that's what I'm hoping to do with my research, of trying to help the coral reefs and understand the coral reefs.
And in your research, that is so important. Have you seen kind of like a trend in certain regions that are greatly affected and regions that aren't affected as much, or is it kind of the same across the globe?
It is not the same across the globe. There are places that are more affected than others. In some places, and this is where you can't, it's very difficult when people need to eat. And so there are places where the population has grown over time, or tourists have come such that the local fishermen want to catch fish in order to feed the tourists that come. And so they catch fish, and they catch the larger fish, and then there aren't any large fish anymore. And so they start catching smaller and smaller fish. And at some point, I mean, there are places in the world where they do dynamite fishing, because the fish are hidden in the corals. And so if you throw a stick of dynamite and it explodes, then the fish come out of the coral, and that's how you can catch them. And so those places have been devastated by the fishing pressure. Other places that have not had that, or have had policies in place to protect the reef, have not seen such a devastating effect. Then on top of that, you have things like in the Florida Keys, there was, people have nice houses in the Florida Keys, and they didn't have, and the waste, basically the things that came out of the toilet, went directly onto the reef. Now there are regulations as far as treating sewage and not having raw sewage just go into the reef. So there are various places are hit by various disturbances. And so it's not universal across the world what is going on with different reefs.
And I can understand that variance between regions can make the research to try to help each reef different, and it kind of makes that problem more complex. So that's interesting. And you keep saying like your diving experiences, and you started when you were 21. So your students who are in your lab, did they have to get certified in some way to do these diving? So they had to get a diving certificate, and they're working on their degree.
So the people in my lab actually so there are several diving certificates. The people in my lab came in with an amateur diving certificate, which you can get from various diving organizations. And in fact, at the University of Mississippi, students can sign up and take diving courses as part of their undergraduate degree. But in order to be able to dive scientifically through the university, you have to take a scientific diving course. And so even though they were certified to dive, they had to take the scientific diving course and pass that. And now they can dive scientifically in these different places.
So at my school, we have this thing called Senior Project. And a lot of students decide that they're going to get certified to be able to dive. And so I bet it's more amateur than the scientific, but that's interesting as well. So you were talking about the no pink on the diving suits. So have you seen other gaps between male and females in your career as a marine biologist, or also as a professor in biology?
Excellent question. So in addition to the no pink, when I first started to dive, basically all the diving equipment looked like it had come from the Navy, or because it was there was no wetsuits that took into account that a woman actually has a chest. And so those were various things that you had to deal with. And luckily, I don't have a size 5 foot, because I fit into a small what's known as a bootie. It's kind of a shoe that you put on and then you put on your fin. So that worked out. But as a woman, you bring up a really interesting point, because women are still, even though 50% of incoming classes for undergraduate degrees in biology are women in afterwards in graduate degrees, there are less of them, and then there are less as the field, as you go up, so-called the professional ladder. There's a lot about, I mean, it's complicated, but one of the things is it's, even though we're in 2020, it is still not an equal playing field. But having said that, that's not a reason to give up. And if you want to do something, then nobody should stop you. And because if they do, then that means that we haven't, we're not making progress. And not that I mean, you can be a trailblazer based on your achievements, and that's the important thing. So one of the things to kind of keep in mind at all times is that sometimes opportunity knocks, but you kind of have to generate those opportunities. If you seek them out, then you will progress. To sit around and say, well, I'm waiting for somebody to invite me to go and do research. That's not going to happen. You need to actually look for opportunities, volunteer, or find a research, whether in your school where you end up going undergraduate, or in the summer where there are, and go for it, because you are your best advocate.
And so all the trailblazers and the women who have provoked such change to go from maybe 0% of girls in undergraduate were studying biology to 50%. Is there one woman, if you had the opportunity to sit down and have lunch with her, who would that woman be?
Probably Eugenie Clark. Eugenie Clark recently, I mean, in the last few years, passed away at 90 something. She was known as the Shark Lady, and she studied sharks. And I mean, before me, so she's old, much older than I am, but she just did everything and did her research and was very successful doing her research.
Every time I ask someone that, they're always like, there's too many, there's so many to choose from. But no, that I'll have to look into her. That sounds really cool. But as we come to a close, is there any other advice that you have for girls looking to pursue a career like yours or a career in STEM?
Yes, there's a lot of, I mean, so one thing that is really important is that it is your life. It is your choices. And a lot of times we do things because maybe we think that's the thing we need to do or should do for our family, for whoever. And you, when all is said and done, you need to be happy with the choices that you made, not feel like you missed opportunities. That's not to say that one will never fail, but if you never try, you never succeed either. And let me just, I'll give you an example from my life. I wanted to have a research career. I wanted to head my lab. I wanted to be a professor at a university, and I am. I also wanted to be a mother. And if you had asked me when I was 18 or 17 how many kids I would have, I would probably have told you 2, because that's the family size that I came from. But for me, what was right was 5. And but I didn't, and life is not perfect, and you make compromises all the time. and you choose all the time. But I did not give up wanting to have kids for my career. And I did not give up my career because, of having kids. And that is, and what I'm trying to say is it's a very, very personal choice. I can't tell you what is right for you. But what I'm trying to say is that I think I would have regretted not having kids if I had not had kids and said, oh, in order to be a marine biologist, I can't have a family. I have to devote my life to my career. And I know I would have regretted not seeing my potential. Being a mother is incredibly important, but I find my research to be intellectually stimulating and tapping into my talents in a different way. And so I'm a much more whole person because I have those aspects as opposed to having only one of them in my life. And for me, that works. And so what I'm trying to say is, don't give up on your dreams because you think you shouldn't pursue them, but don't give up on other things that you want to do, because you will and you can find the time to do it. Even though you feel like you're always juggling, you can do it. And and you need to be you need to do what's right for you.
Absolutely. And I use some of those ideas in my life when people ask me, how do you make time to do what you do? And it's, if you're passionate, you will make time and you will find time to do, whatever it is that you're passionate about.
And I'd like to add to what you said. Sometimes you're passionate about something, but it's not an easy road. Or you apply for a summer job or something and you don't get it, or you apply to do something and you didn't get it. It's very hard to get to not succeed, right? But the thing is, and it's okay to feel sorry at that point in time. But I think the strength is in getting up, picking up the pieces, putting them together, and continuing on. Because if you give up, it's something that you need to do for yourself. And so don't give up on yourself. And that is the most important thing.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I absolutely loved every second of this. This was so much fun.
Thank you all for listening. If you have any questions or comments, you can contact us through Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at KolgaGems. You can also reach us through email. Our email is kolgagems@gmail.com. That is COLGAGEMS. And I'll see y'all next time.